I'll never forget the day my grandfather gathered us all in his mansion's marble-floored living room, his frail hands trembling as he announced he was dying. We sat there, 37 of us, cousins, aunts, uncles, all watching this man who had built a billion-dollar empire from nothing. When the lawyer handed each of us an envelope, my heart pounded. Inside was a crisp $10 bill and a handwritten note that simply said, "Use it wisely." $10. From a billionaire. The room erupted in chaos, voices screaming about disrespect and greed. My cousin Sarah threw her envelope at the wall. Uncle Mike stormed out cursing. But I saw something in grandfather's eyes that day, something that made me hold onto the $10 bill like it was made of gold. I didn't know it then, but that moment would change everything I thought I knew about my family, about money, and about the old man everyone called heartless. Before we dive deeper into this incredible story, I want to invite you to join our community here at Revenge Unleashed, where we share real stories about people who stood up, fought back, and found justice in the most unexpected ways. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like if you're already hooked, and drop a comment telling me what you would do with $10 from a billionaire grandfather. Your engagement helps us bring more powerful stories like this one to people who need to hear them. My name is Marcus, and I'm 28 years old now, but this story takes me back to when I was 26, working 2 jobs just to make rent in a cramped studio apartment in Chicago. My grandfather, William Patterson, was a legend in the financial world. He'd started with nothing in the 1960s, built Patterson Industries from the ground up, and by the time I was born, he owned real estate across 3 states, had investments in tech companies, and lived in a mansion that looked like something out of a movie. But here's the thing about grandfather William, he was cold. Not cruel exactly, but distant, calculating, the kind of man who saw everything as a transaction. Growing up, I barely knew him. He'd show up at Christmas sometimes, hand out expensive gifts without wrapping them, and leave before dinner. My mom, his youngest daughter, always made excuses for him. "He's busy building something bigger than himself," she'd say. But I think even she felt the sting of his absence. The rest of the family, though, they stayed close to him for one reason only, money. My Uncle Mike had borrowed millions for failed business ventures. Aunt Patricia lived in a house grandfather bought. Cousin Sarah drove a Mercedes he'd gifted her for her 21st birthday. They were all circling, waiting for the inheritance they believed they'd earned just by being blood. When grandfather called that family meeting 6 months before he died, everyone came running. The mansion was packed. People I hadn't seen in years suddenly appeared, wearing fake smiles and designer clothes bought with his money. Grandfather sat in his leather chair, looking smaller than I remembered, his face gray and tired. The cancer had taken so much from him already. He told us he'd be gone within months, that he'd made his final decisions about his estate, and that he wanted to do something meaningful with his last act as patriarch of our family. That's when the lawyer started handing out the envelopes. I watched faces go from anticipation to confusion to rage in seconds. $10 each. 37 family members. $370 total from a man worth over $1 billion. My Uncle Mike's face turned purple. "This is a joke, right? After everything I've done for you." Aunt Patricia actually started crying, real tears streaming down her face. "How could you humiliate us like this?" Cousin Sarah was already on her phone, probably texting her friends about what a monster our grandfather was. But I looked at that $10 bill differently. Maybe it was because I was the only one in the room who'd never asked him for anything. I'd paid my own way through community college, worked construction jobs and night shifts at diners. I'd never wanted his money because I'd never wanted to owe him anything. So when everyone else saw an insult, I saw a puzzle. Use it wisely. Those 3 words kept echoing in my mind. I stayed after everyone left, while grandfather sat alone in his chair, looking more tired than ever. "You're angry too?" he asked without looking at me. I sat down across from him. "No, sir. I'm curious." For the first time in my life, I saw him smile, really smile. "Good. I was hoping at least one of you would be." We talked for hours that night. He told me about building his fortune, about the sacrifices nobody saw, about watching his own children become entitled and lazy, about grandchildren who only called when they needed money. "I gave them everything, Marcus, and it turned them into nothing," he said. "That $10 is a test. A final chance to show me who actually learned anything from having me as family." Over the next few months, I watched my family tear itself apart. Uncle Mike hired lawyers to challenge the will before grandfather even died. Aunt Patricia stopped visiting him entirely. Cousin Sarah posted on social media about elder abuse, painting grandfather as a senile old man being manipulated. Family group chats exploded with accusations and theories. Some thought he'd hidden the real money somewhere. Others believed he'd been swindled by his advisors. Nobody considered that maybe, just maybe, he knew exactly what he was doing. I spent those months visiting grandfather twice a week. We'd sit in his study, surrounded by books and old photographs, and he'd tell me stories I'd never heard. About growing up poor in rural Tennessee, about his first business failing and losing everything, about meeting my grandmother and promising her he'd build something that lasted. Money magnifies who you already are, Marcus, he told me one evening. It made me more isolated, more suspicious. But your cousins, it made them weak, dependent, hollow. I enabled that, and it's my biggest regret. I still had that $10 bill. I'd put it in my wallet and carried it everywhere. One day, grandfather noticed it when I was paying for our coffee during one of my visits. You haven't spent it, he observed. I shrugged. Didn't feel right. Still don't know what you meant by using it wisely. He laughed, a sound I'd maybe heard twice in my entire life. You're the only one who kept it. Everyone else either threw it away or spent it on lottery tickets and fast food out of spite. You're the only one who treated it like it meant something. 3 weeks before grandfather died, he called me to the mansion one last time. He was bedridden by then, the cancer having won its cruel battle. But his mind was sharp, his eyes clear. He handed me a sealed envelope, thick and heavy. Don't open this until after the funeral, he said. And Marcus, I'm sorry I wasn't a better grandfather to you. But I'm grateful you became a good man despite me, not because of me. Those were the last words he ever spoke to me. He died 4 days later, on a Tuesday morning, with only his nurse present. The family showed up for the funeral, of course, dressed in black and wearing expressions of practiced grief. The will reading was a circus. The family lawyer stood before us in grandfather's study, the room where I'd spent so many evenings listening to stories. He announced that William Patterson's entire estate, every property, every investment, every penny of his billion-dollar fortune, was going to charity. The room exploded. Uncle Mike threatened to sue. Aunt Patricia fainted, or pretended to. Cousin Sarah screamed about betrayal and family loyalty. But the lawyer wasn't finished. However, he continued, raising his voice over the chaos, Mr. Patterson did leave specific instructions for one heir. Every eye in the room turned to search for the lucky winner. The lawyer looked directly at me. Marcus Patterson, please step forward. My heart stopped. I felt 36 pairs of eyes burning into me as I walked to the front. The lawyer handed me a document. Mr. Patterson established a trust in your name 6 months ago. It contains $10 million, to be distributed to you over 10 years, with conditions. You must use the funds to build something meaningful, something that helps others, and you must never give any of it to other family members who are present in this room today. The silence was deafening. Then the room exploded again, but this time directed at me. Accusations flew. I'd manipulated him. I'd isolated him. I'd stolen their inheritance. Uncle Mike actually lunged at me before the lawyer stepped between us. Through it all, I just stood there, holding that document and remembering all those conversations in the study, all those stories about building something that lasted. That night, in my apartment, I finally opened the envelope grandfather had given me before he died. Inside was a letter in his shaky handwriting. Marcus, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I want you to know why I chose you. It wasn't the $10, though that told me something important. It was that you were the only one who visited me for me, not for what I could give you. You worked 2 jobs rather than ask me for help. You showed dignity and independence. The $10 was never about the money. It was about seeing who had the character to recognize that a gift's value isn't in its price tag but in the intention behind it. Use what I've given you to build something beautiful. Use it to be the man I should have been. And know that in my final months, you gave an old fool something priceless, genuine companionship without agenda. The aftermath was brutal. Half the family stopped speaking to me. Uncle Mike's lawsuit went nowhere, the will was airtight. Aunt Patricia wrote me a letter calling me a snake and a thief. Cousin Sarah's social media posts about me got vicious enough that I had to block her. But a few family members reached out quietly, my mom among them. I'm proud of you, she said. And I think Dad finally got it right at the end. I used that first million from the trust to start a foundation that helps young people from low-income backgrounds get business training and seed funding. I named it the William Patterson Second Chance Foundation. Every recipient gets a $10 bill with their first check and a note that says, "Use it wisely." Most of them keep that $10 bill, just like I kept mine. They understand what I learned that day in the mansion, that value and worth aren't the same thing, that character is built in how you handle both abundance and scarcity, and that the best inheritance anyone can give you is the chance to prove who you really are. 5 years later, the foundation has helped launch 73 small businesses and sent 42 kids to college who wouldn't have gone otherwise. I still work a regular job, managing the foundation in my free time, because grandfather taught me in those final months that having money should never mean losing yourself in it. I drive a used Honda. I live in a modest 2-bedroom house. I've never touched the social circles my cousins used to brag about. And I've never been happier. Sometimes I take out that original $10 bill, now laminated and framed on my office wall. Next to it is a photo of grandfather and me from one of our last visits together, both of us smiling genuine smiles. People who visit always ask about it, and I tell them the story. Not for revenge, not to gloat, but because there's a lesson there that matters. The people who truly value you will see your worth even when you have nothing to offer them materially. And the greatest gift you can give someone isn't money or things, but the opportunity to discover who they really are when everything else is stripped away. My family learned that lesson the hard way. In fighting over money they never earned, they lost something far more valuable: dignity, relationships, self-respect. Meanwhile, I gained something priceless: the memory of an old man who finally found one person in his life who cared about him for reasons that had nothing to do with his bank account. That memory and those lessons are worth more than any inheritance could ever be. So here's what I want you to take from this story: the next time someone offers you something that seems too small, too insignificant, too insulting, look deeper. Ask yourself what they might really be offering. Because sometimes the smallest gifts carry the biggest truths. Sometimes $10 from a billionaire isn't an insult, it's an invitation to prove who you are. And sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's simply becoming someone who didn't need it in the first place. Grandfather taught me that, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure his final lesson wasn't wasted on just one grateful grandson.